And this is where we get into question 4.
Brad, do you want to take
Yeah,
question
so question 4 was what questions you need answered in order to inform an opinion about the question of rent governance. 104 people responded to this question. And basically what happened is we took those questions and figured out that they weren't questions Wendy and Bridget looked at them that rec advisory could answer. So they basically farmed them out to people who could answer them. And so there were 5 questions that were sent to 4 people, and Cindy Godin, Jeff Harton, Joyce Stannard, and Bob Willie have all been people who have presented or authored the petition. We sent those 5 questions out. I say we, the Rec Advisory Council, sent those questions out. Essex Junction and Recreation Parks received 9 questions. CCSU was sent 5 questions, and the Village of Essex Junction was sent 35 questions.
The petitioners, basically the questions we sent, not to go over all of these, but the petitioners, the questions we asked them are basically, why did you circulate the petition, and why now? Why right now are you circulating the petition? And what benefits do you think, if I'm remembering correctly, what benefits do you assume will occur if governance changes? Right. Those were the questions we asked the petitioners.
Those will come up here.
Yes. Oh, they will.
So this is the letter that was sent out, basically just saying that Rec Advisory is on a fact-finding mission, and we request your responses by Monday, December 6th for this meeting tonight. And I think everybody had 3 weeks to answer those questions from when they were sent out. So here are the questions for the petitioners. Again, there were 5 questions. Here are the questions that were sent. These are based on the survey results, and Rec Advisory putting those into formal questions based on a lot of different comments. But so the questions were, what do you think will be accomplished by achieving a transfer of governance? In your opinion, how will a transfer of governance benefit the community? In your opinion, how will a transfer of governance enhance our recreation department? In your opinion, what needs? Please provide a list that are not being met by CCSU governance, and how will the village oversight address each of these needs? So those questions were sent out to each of those 4 individuals. Bob Willie was the only one to respond as of this afternoon.
Yeah.
And Bob Willie said in an email from Tuesday, we understand that the trustees are still evaluating how to proceed with school board discussions and plan to review tonight. Jeff and other interested parties also prefer to wait for the results of the trustee meeting, which happened Tuesday night. And hopefully we can reply again tomorrow. There wasn't a follow-up response, and there was no response or any communication from Cindy Godin, Jeff Harton, or Joyce Stannard. So we don't have any answers to those questions.
No. We're going to have to proceed with that.
EJRP was asked 9 questions, and those questions are ones that I wrote the author the answers for. So the first question was, what is our EJRP budget? FY11 budget is 1.5 million, 63,000. And user fees are about 56%, 590,000 for the general fund and 75,000 for the capital fund. And the EJRP tax rate has declined or remained level for the past 5 years. Who manages the EJRP budget was a question that came up. The budget and capital plan are developed and approved by the Prudential Committee, the governing body. Then they're voted on as 2 separate items via Australian ballot in April by the voters of the Village of Essex Junction. Once the budget's approved, it's overseen by CCSU Chief Financial Officer and the Executive Director of Operations, and then it's implemented and managed by the EJRP Director. The question came up several times, is the EJRP program self-sustaining? And so we talked about this a few meetings ago. On average nationally, most rec departments are supported 60% by tax dollars. EJRP is 44% supported by tax dollars. So most of the programs are considered pay to play, and then the tax revenue is basically used to support the infrastructure to manage and develop those programs. How much does EJRP contribute to the school district for managing the EJRP program? So as a preface to say, so people understood the size of our department, we have a $1.5 million budget, 300 employees annually. In a year, we process, this is information that came from Grant that he presented several weeks ago at a Prudential Committee meeting. In 1 year, we processed 1,200 accounts payable, make over 2,200 deposits, serve 5,200 participants through 130 programs. So that's just the volume that we're talking about in terms of the size of our department. So in FY11, in order for the school district to manage EJRP, they charged EJRP $83,000. They charged EJRP to administer fiscal services, treasurer services, supervision, IT support, HR support, and consultation for curriculum, special education, and legal support. And of course, fiscal services being the largest, payroll, accounts payable, budget execution, bank deposits, financial reporting, auditing, all that stuff comes through central office. So those are things that are done outside of our office. The current governance structure of EJRP and what oversight is provided. This is a little difficult to show up here on PowerPoint, just given the way that it shows things, but you can get the general gist. And here you see the residents of Essex Junction at the top, and there are several ways that residents influence EJRP, which is on the bottom. If we work our way from left to right, first we see that the residents vote annually on our budget, and they vote as two separate line items. We already talked about the Australian ballot on the capital plan and our budget. So that's one way a resident of Essex Junction can influence EJRP. The second is that the residents actually elect 5 people to the Board of Trustees for the village, and then that Board of Trustees owns and oversees the real property known as Maple Street Park, Cascade Park, and Stevens Park. And they do have to sign off on any significant land improvements, as they have to sign off on development applications that go before planning and zoning. Next, the residents of Essex Junction elect 5 members to the Prudential Committee. The Prudential Committee is the group that oversees Essex Junction School District. Essex Junction School District consists of 5 different entities. It's Summit Street School, Hiawatha School, ADL, Fleming, and EJRP. And this, where you'll have to follow along here, Essex Junction School District in 1971 was asked by the trustees to operate, maintain, and administer the Parks and Recreation Department, and they've done so for 40 years. They are a member of the Chittenden Central Supervisory Union, which consists of 3 different school districts, Essex Junction being one of them. It also consists of Westford and U46 districts. And that's where we have our general oversight in terms of staff. The Executive Director of Operations and Chief Financial Officer is my supervisor, and he's supervised by the superintendent, who's supervised by the CCSU board. So all of those are methods that Essex Junction residents are able to influence EJRP. And lastly, on the far right, you'll see that Essex Junction residents, you folks sitting at this table, volunteer, 7 of you, to be part of the REC Advisory Council. That Advisory Council it stays in check with the Prudential Committee, and then serves as a conduit to the community, providing us with your support and with your recommendations, directly influencing things that we do here as a staff.
I just want to you mentioned the thing on the trustees, you said that the residents vote and elect the trustees, and you said the trustees own, they don't really own, no more than the President of the United States owns the country. They
correct. Yeah, that's what
just clarify that.
The village of Essex.
Owns it, and kind of funny.
Sorry, yeah, the village of Essex Junction owns the real property. Okay. Another EJRP question: what's the purpose of the REC Advisory Council? This is straight from the council's charter. The council serves in an advisory capacity to the department's staff, administrative staff, in the development, maintenance, and stewardship of a comprehensive system of leisure and recreational services as provided by EJRP. Does EJRP report on a monthly, quarterly, or annual basis? And does EJRP give a financial state of the department report? So monthly, we meet as a REC Advisory Council, consult with the citizens in that way. We also monthly, I write a director's report and provide information to the Prudential Committee, and that's part of their packet as they review, so they know what's going on with REC. 2 to 5 times per year, roughly, I, as the director, am asked to attend a Prudential Committee meeting to deliver a report, answer questions, present information. Grant, the CCSU Chief Financial Officer and Executive Director of Operations, provides annual or quarterly year-to-date budget reports to the Prudential Committee on on our progress of the budget for the fiscal year. And then annually, we do an annual report. It's a narrative and a budget report that's available online, and citizens are able to pick those up. Will program offerings remain the same? This was a tricky question. I think it was sent to all three groups, to CCSU, to the village, and to EJRP, because there wasn't a clear answer. So the only thing I was able to say here is staff currently have the support to create and manage programs in order to meet the needs of the community. And today we just don't know how things will work with village governance. So it's not saying it'll be the same or different. It's just not clear at this time. And then another program-related question. Is this? Yeah. Will program prices remain the same? Again, right now we base our program pricing based on our overall budget, our vision, mission, and pricing policies. And at this point in time, we just don't know, what the budget, vision, mission, or pricing policies would be under different governments. So next are the questions for CCSU. These were sent to Grant, the Chief Financial Officer and Executive Director of Operations. There were 5 questions here, but they were very long questions, so they're kind of broken up into smaller pieces. The first question is, what is the anticipated total savings to CCSU if the supervisory union no longer administers the EJRP? And there's a lot more in terms of context to the answers to these questions in the whole report. For the purposes of this, it's very brief, but basically we represent a very small piece. EJRP represents a very small piece of CCSU, 2.9% of their total budget. So if we were no longer there, they anticipate a savings of about $10,000. And you can think of that as, the superintendent and the CCSU Chief Financial Officer and the Executive Director of Curriculum, the Executive Director of Technology, all of those people stay in place. They don't disappear when EJRP disappears. So there is maybe a reduction. They might see a savings in some of the folks that provide fiscal support to us. But in general, we're just paying a small chunk of people's salaries who we use some of their time over the course of the year. How much of that would be saved by Essex Junction School District? So we see CCSU is going to save $10,000. So what does that result in for the Essex Junction School District? Well, actually, the cost to Essex Junction School Districts and taxpayers would increase by $52,000. This is a pretty complex equation, how all this works out. But essentially, Essex Junction School District, as a member of CCSU, is charged a portion of the total bills. So you look at how much does it cost to run the supervisory union. We send out bills to Essex Junction School District, to U46, and to Westford. With Essex Junction School District no longer having rec to contribute towards their portion, they're going to have to come up with that money in some other way. So ultimately, it's actually a cost increase for Essex Junction School District. So we talked earlier, there are 5 pieces of Essex Junction School District: Hiawatha, Summit, Fleming, ADL, and rec. So now, instead of having 5 pieces, there are only 4 pieces to contribute to the total amount. So while that amount will go down a little bit, the number of contributing members is reduced, and therefore the price per member goes up. So given that there would be a decrease in the expenses and assessment, now only 4 groups, this is what we're just talking about, sharing the expense, how would that affect the school tax rate? So now we're talking about, okay, we've talked the dollars, how does it affect the tax rate? And essentially, what you see here is there's an increase in the tax rate. And it looks and appears minor here, but I guess, the FY11 Essex Junction School District homestead tax rate would have been 0.057 instead of 0.0536, an increase of 0.0034. So how does that translate to you as a property owner or homeowner in Essex Junction? Again, these calculations are pretty complicated. But what was said here is, okay, if it's just a homeowner with a $250,000 house, not factoring in income sensitivity and all the other pieces of how you figure out taxes, the school taxes would have been up $8.50. So translating this into what that means, okay? So for a family to pay the same total tax burden in FY11, your recreation department taxes would have had to gone down by $8.50 if your school taxes are going up by $8.50, okay? So that means if the village were to govern rec based on everything being the same now, they would have $35,000 less tax revenue to operate rec. Does everybody follow that? Kind of?
Even I do, so I think you're not right.
Yeah, okay. School taxes go up, you need EJRP taxes to go down for everything to stay level. That means there's less tax money for EJRP to operate. So if the village were running it, there would be less money, $35,000 less. EJRP also pays U46 for some services. Would there be savings if they no longer had rec? The answer is no, there are no significant savings. 50% of EJRP programs take place in the schools. This is back to the Dave Neal conversation. You know, the facilities, I think Dave makes a great point I didn't really think about. We always talk about 50% of our programs being in the schools, but if we talk about the whole year. So if you look at the September to May, I think that number would be much higher because we just don't have the facilities. So the CCSU board has the ability to change the policy. Basically right now, rec does not charge money to use school facilities unless it's outside of the regular day. And if it is, then we'll charge security or custodial charges. So they could change that policy. Even if they didn't change the policy, right now, because Mark Ryan and I, and anybody who works for EJRP is considered a district employee, they're given security codes and keys and access to different places and equipment and things that if we are an outside entity, you know, coming in, you know, they may not be able to say, oh yeah, you guys just set the alarm and you leave. So there may be some additional charges, but it's kind of hard to predict. And the last question we asked, I think the last question we asked the school district, or what are the key steps? Now there's one more involved in transferring EJRP, and you can see the things. Most of them taking a month. What are the steps and how long does it take? You know, they need to make sure an agreement is in place for the village to repay the bond. Our bond goes through 2018 on the recreation building. Back from 1999, the $2.1 million that was borrowed to refurbish the pool house and the pool and build the recreation center. The school district is responsible to pay that. They have to, you know, cancel some general contracts and insurance, terminate employees, cancel their benefits, produce W-2s early as required by the law, transfer in fund balances if needed, and determine whether or not they're going to run any programs, you know, based on what the village is going to do with rec. And lastly, with programs, I told you we asked all three entities this question. Are there any programs that currently EJRP operates that the school district would continue running in the event of a transfer? And they basically said, you know, it depends on what EJRP would plan to continue. So we're just not sure about that. Certainly, there's a clear need for after-school care and a desire for the schools to have that service. So they would want to identify, you know, who's providing that service if EJRP is no longer under the school district's auspices. So lastly, the questions for the board justice council. We're almost there. These were 35 questions were sent to the village. There were a lot more questions as you went through the survey for the village, because there are a lot of unknowns. So the questions were sent a few days later. Bridget received this letter from Dave Crawford, the village manager, and you know, some of the things that came out of that letter. Most of these decisions have not been made, so I cannot answer them. The trustees noted that the questions were ones that certainly should be discussed in the consideration of governance questions. So they go on to say, you know, that these are good, valid questions, I think, is what they're saying. The trustees are planning to discuss the RAC questions along with the agreement and related issues at the December 7th meeting. That was a couple of days ago. And then they said we thank EJRP for providing the questions. There are some important issues to be considered. There, you know, again, as of this afternoon, so there's still no answers or follow-up received since 11/18. But we'll just go through the questions there are answers, but I'm just going to go through them quickly. There are 35 of them, but we just want to run through. So, and we did break these up by budget, governance, staff, and programs. So we've talked about the budgets via Australian ballot. Question, how will the budget be voted on if the village were to govern recreation? Currently, EJRP, any revenue that comes through EJRP stays with EJRP. The question came up, will that be the same under EJRP governance? Will the Recreation Department funding be separate from the general fund? EJRP has a rolling capital fund that's currently funded at a rate of $75,000 per year, voted on by Australian ballot. Will that continue? If so, at what level? Will it just be for recreation? Will it be part of the rest of the village's capital plan? Those kind of questions. If the village were to oversee rec, what are, if any, the anticipated increase in any costs for the village? So, EJRP has 300 employees, $1.5 million budget. We kind of talked about all those things. So, will there be any increase in cost for legal services, audit services, property and liability insurance, workers' compensation? For the village to take those things over. What would the tax implications for the village property tax rate be? So we talked about already the implications for the school district and how the taxes for SH Junction School District would go up for the average family. So the question is what would happen to the village tax rate? EJRP has phone and internet through the high school. How would phone and internet services be provided? EJRP has cell phones. Who would be the provider when the governance change? Would there be changes to the EJRP mission and vision? Would there be changes to the 10-year master plan? And how will the ownership of the buildings and the bond debt be transferred over, given that the school district is still responsible for the bond through 2019? What accounting system will be used? And does it already exist? Do they have the ability to add 300, employees and process 2,200 deposits and that kind of stuff? For the village, what are the key steps involved? Same question we asked CCSU. What has to be done in order to get from point A to point B if the community were to elect this as the correct path? So EJRP, some of the things that happen over there, we use Facebook, and I say Ryan uses Facebook for us. And Twitter. We have 525 friends on Facebook and 90 followers on Twitter. I think social media has been an important facet of some of the things we've done over the past couple of years. Will that be part of, or how will that work under village oversight? EJRP, working with the school district, we were able to obtain our own website and domain name. So we're not at ccsu.org/EJRP. It's its own domain name. And certainly the website that Ryan manages is pretty interactive. People can comment, post, feedback's given both ways. It's kind of a two-way street. Will that be able to continue under village oversight? The advisory council, there was a question about governance. Would this advisory council still exist in the same capacity? If not, then how will the village, factor in for community input? And then there's a question that, about the work that you all have done about gathering feedback from residents, and what the trustees done to gather public input on this subject. These were taken directly right out of the survey as people had written them, because it came up several times. So why are time and resources being spent exploring an issue raised by such a small but vocal minority? Why are the trustees adamant that this is to be dealt with in such a short time frame? Is there an emergency? And if it ain't broke, why fix it? And if you listen to Ryan's pieces of work earlier, those comments came up relatively frequently. But the school district has managed the recreation department for 40 years. Why is a change needed at this time? These questions continue for the village. So this goes back to the Dave Neal conversation a little bit, but in terms of accessing resources. So 80% of our EJRP program users are youth. And so therefore, we use a lot of support from guidance counselors, principals, athletic directors, and teachers. How will the village provide, the support and expertise in reference to working with youth? We also get a lot of IT support. because of all the technology stuff that we do over there, so we're wondering what kind of IT support there is from the village. EJRP utilizes maintenance support. And then you see a lot of these areas that in-house we don't do. So we do use school district personnel to do some of these things: plumbing, electrical, auto repair, equipment repair. Those things, are services that are accessed by this, from the school district. How will those services be provided under village governance, and who will pay for those kinds of things?
Brad, there's no additional charge for those services that we use because that's included in the fee that we're paying, right?
So all of our fees go towards all
Okay.
of those different.
So these are services we can tap
But
into?
we don't pay for them
Additionally?
as used. So,
Got it.
unless we're purchasing parts and things
Okay.
like that. But otherwise, it's based on historical use. These are some staff-related questions. Does the village adhere to a pay scale? How would, if you're taking over employees, how would all of both full-time and part-time employees pay rates be calculated? What kind of benefits are provided for the village, from the village versus the school district? Those questions came up. For staff who have been with EJRP for a long time and accrued benefits, how do those transfer over into village governance? Who would provide town finance, human resource, or administrative support of EJRP operations? We talked about some of those services that are provided. What would the expense be? Would they have to hire more staff or not? And how much would that cost? So with the village budget, I think is currently $3 million, give or take. So the question is, if the village were taking on the rec department, additional $1.5 million, would there be an additional workload for existing employees, and if so, would they be compensated for the additional work? And if so, how much? And then would there be any changes to existing staff, EJRP staff? The structure of the personnel, job descriptions, work-related responsibilities. And the question, was asked was what assurances are there that existing recreation staff will be employed under village in current positions. So several times in reference to the village staff workload, it's been said that they are at their limit. In its current configuration and numbers, can the village staff assume the additional responsibilities of adding a new department? And then it was asked for them to provide an organizational chart and explain how recreation would fit into their existing organization. So that is the last question.
Are you sure?
Yeah, sure. So all of this information tomorrow will be available on the EJRP website. And you can click on the governance tab in the upper right-hand corner and then click on survey results. This PowerPoint will be available, and the executive summary and full 19-page report. And there just needs to be one question for you.